This morning, thousands of people are rallying in Copenhagen in support of Greenland. It comes as a bipartisan delegation of U.S. lawmakers are in Denmark this weekend, with hopes to reassure leaders of the country and Greenland of congressional support after President Trump's threats to seize the Arctic island. Democratic Senator Chris Coons and GOP Senator Lisa Murkowski spoke in a press conference this morning on where things stand with Danish leaders.
I think de-escalating the level, tone, and frequency of rhetoric around this and injecting some reality about what are the actual circumstances of the security threats. There are no current security threats to Greenland.
I think it's going to be important for us as members, not as Democrats or as Republicans, but for us as members of Congress who have been here at this moment in time to return to Washington to speak to all of our colleagues and those in the administration about what we have heard.
Yesterday, President Trump made another threat, doubling down on territorial acquisitions, saying he would place tariffs on countries if they do not, quote, go along with his plans. Joining us now is one of those lawmakers in Denmark, Democratic Congresswoman Sarah McBride of Delaware. Thank you so much for joining us today. I was expecting a more bucolic background, but it looks like you are confined to your hotel room. So I talked with a number of diplomats this week, Danish and Greenlanders, who basically speculation was running rampant about how Trump is going to go about this territorial acquisition that he seems, as he has said, psychologically set on. What are one of actually the most repeated refrain that I heard was the fear that Trump's billionaire mafia, the PayPal mafia, Ken Howry, who is the ambassador to Denmark, are going to essentially buy Greenlanders off. In a normal world, I think these ideas would sound far-fetched, but in a post-Venezuela landscape especially, a lot of these options sound very realistic. What are you hearing today in your conversations with Greenlanders and Danish leaders?
Well, over the last 48 hours, my colleagues from both the Senate and the House, both Democrats and Republicans, and I have met with the Prime Minister of Denmark, the Prime Minister of Greenland, members of Parliament from both the Danish and Greenlandic Parliament. We've met with business leaders, Foreign Minister, and Defense Minister. And one thing that I think Americans need to understand is that even the mere discussion of acquisition of Greenland is deeply destabilizing. It is deeply destabilizing here in Denmark and is deeply frightening to people in Greenland. We've been hearing from leaders that families in Greenland are debating leaving, that children are not able to sleep at night. We are hearing that they are frightened for their safety. They are frightened for their freedoms, their right to self-determination. And yet, despite that, in all of these meetings, what we hear from everyone is a deep appreciation for the U.S.-Danish alliance, for NATO, for the United States' long-standing partnership with Greenland, and a willingness, an open arm to any kind of increased partnership, any kind of increased investment by the United States in Greenland, short of seizing Greenland or taking it over. It is clear that Greenlanders do not want to be part of the United States. That is abundantly clear from what we've heard and from polling. And any effort to acquire Greenland would fundamentally undermine their right to self-determination.
Congresswoman, it also seems that Greenlanders don't even want to be a part of Denmark anymore. So like the idea that they would go from being part of Denmark to part of the United States goes against any person who's paying a lot of attention to this issue, even a little bit of attention. Denmark is a founding member of NATO, and the question that I've had, and other people have had this week, that is a question that would have shocked all of us if we were talking about this, during the Joe Biden presidency, during the Barack Obama presidency, during Trump 1.0, is Donald Trump okay with fighting NATO? And our colleague Vaughn Hilliard, the senior White House reporter for MS Now, asked President Trump about this on Friday. Let's play that.
Mr. President, do you commit to not militarily engaging NATO partners?
I don't talk about that.
Mr. President,
You're not willing to commit to not attacking a NATO partner?
Ma'am, I'm just having a hard time understanding and watching a president of the United States not taking that off of the table. One, are people talking about that where you are? And two, what do you read from a president of the United States not saying that I don't talk about that when someone's asking him, will he commit to not attacking a NATO partner?
Well, one thing that has been true for the last 80 years, and one thing that should remain true moving forward, is that the NATO alliance is ironclad. One of the reasons why we are here as members of Congress is to express on behalf of ourselves, but also I believe on behalf of most Americans and many of our colleagues in Congress, is that we continue to value the NATO alliance. And there is no question that the rhetoric that we are seeing is not only stabilizing, but the possibility of any kind of acquisition or takeover of Greenland would fundamentally undermine the NATO alliance, which has been the greatest force for stability, for peace, for freedom that the world has ever known. Mm-hmm. And that Greenland, as part of the Kingdom of Denmark, is part of NATO. And I will just say to the opening part of your question, we spoke with the Greenlandic Prime Minister. We spoke with members of the Greenlandic Parliament and members of the Parliament of the Kingdom of Denmark, which meets here in Copenhagen, that included representatives from Greenland. And they have made clear that if the choice is between Denmark and the United States, they choose Denmark.
Congresswoman, you were on the House Foreign Affairs Committee, just so people know this. One thing that we haven't talked about is the fact that Greenland and Denmark aren't just sitting around hoping and praying that the United States, that President Trump doesn't follow through on his threats or his suggestions. Germany has sent troops, military personnel, to Greenland. How willing is Denmark? How willing are Greenlanders? How willing is NATO to invoke Article 5 if the United States, if President Trump does follow through on those threats?
Well, this is an unprecedented situation, and I do not want to get into speculation around that particular matter. We do know, obviously, there are now several NATO nations that have forces in Greenland, which frankly is a welcome development. This administration has claimed that one of the justifications for even discussing taking over Greenland is the need to increase the presence of U.S., Danish, NATO forces in the Arctic, including in Greenland. And so this is one more step in the direction toward greater security in the Arctic. But we have to make clear that the two justifications that this administration continues to utilize around these discussions, an increase in our national security presence in the Arctic and the possibility of securing some of the natural resources that Greenland has that may in the long run be able to be accessed, that in both instances, Greenland and Denmark have said yes and more. They are willing to do anything within the 1951 bilateral agreement between the United States and Denmark, which essentially says that in these spaces we can partner with Greenland so long as we ask respectfully. They have said yes, so long as it is happening within the framework of international law and their right to self-determination.
Congresswoman Sarah McBride, thank you so much for joining us, for talking us through this, and we'll probably ask you some more questions when y'all get back.
Thank you.